Talk a little bit about my history in this throughout, but governance spaces I've been in since the 90s. So I built my first intranet and PMO in 1996 for Pacific Bell, if anybody remembers the old phone company. I worked for Pacific Telesys Shared Services. And so then PacBell Wireless, or PacBell Mobile Services, which became PacBell Wireless, which then became Singular. And then I went to work for NorthPoint, which was one of the DSL companies. Anyway, yeah. Was in telecom for a long time, but was building PMOs. I was a business analyst and then a project manager for a long time and did some other stuff. All right, so going through talking about governance though, this has been, what's interesting about this, especially in the age of Copilot, which I'm not gonna go specifically into Copilot anything, so this is a Copilot free session.
You just said it 3 times.
I know. Well, I had to. That's how we get paid. But the other thing I was going to say is that, so this is actually, I have a full day governance workshop that I do, which is actually condensed from a 2-day workshop that I do for clients. But I gave this most recently as a 4-hour workshop. Now I'm condensing it down to an hour, so there's a lot. But would say that everything that I show you, I've got more content out there, stuff out on my blog. I've got a whole series where I go into my framework and stuff around it. So you can find it at Buckley Planet, kind of anything, everything, everywhere. The one things I will point out, so I have my co-host for a monthly show, which is going live in like an hour. I don't remember, what time are we today? So I think it's like in an hour. So we'll be live for Joy and I with Ragnar, a fellow MVP over in Germany, and our guest is Alistair Pugin down from South Africa. So that's going live here today. It's a monthly show called Guardians of M365 Governance. And I also do with Sharon Weaver, who's here with Smarter Consulting, a partner company. And we do a weekly show every Monday around project management. So lots of stuff that I do that's out there, and everybody asks how much time, you have so much time to do all this content. And it's because I'm an empty nester, my wife works full time, my dog passed away, so I've got nothing else to do but to sit and create content. All right, so go through, I'm gonna talk about some stuff. I'm just gonna skip past a bunch of these things. If I go too fast, if you say, oh, back up, feel free, just let me know. Just to put this frame things, and I'm gonna move through a bunch of this very quickly. All the slides, like, are we even collecting slides for the event doing that? Okay, I'm just such a bad speaker, like, I know. Every conference is different. So all the slides will be available, so I'll make sure that it all gets, the latest edit of this gets uploaded there. If you need something more, have questions, come by and talk to us today. I'll be in the booth. How much has changed? And I have to change my view. Hang on. Why did it not do this? There it goes. Now it went into the correct view for me. So, all right. So a lot has changed over the last few years. What's amazing is that Microsoft launched Teams. We had this little sidestep called the pandemic, and it dramatically changed a lot of things. What's remarkable about it, I'm sure most of you will identify this, either your company or you have friends that work for companies that thought there's no way we could ever have work from home, we could ever do a hybrid, and then they were forced to do it, and so many companies said it wasn't as difficult as we thought, like we could actually do that. And of course now, post-pandemic, there's, whether you're still hybrid or you're forced back in the office full-time, it's funny, I've been working for companies since 2001 that developed collaboration technology specifically so people remotely could collaborate and work together. And every single one of those companies had no work from home policies. We're building software so people could work anywhere, and no, you cannot work from home. You have to be here. And so that changed a lot. So I know that there's still a lot of change that's going on. If you're not following the Work Lab blog for Microsoft, I highly recommend it. It's very Copilot-centric right now, but there's a lot of stuff underneath the main article that they promote. Microsoft started this. It's actually Microsoft Research that started that, explaining why they're doing the things that they're doing. So they're trying to give you a better picture around the products, how they're thinking about it, cross-product integration of features, like the sharing feature was talked about. The work trend index report that Microsoft does every year is published to that blog. I highly recommend you go take a look at it. It's really well put together. It's like reading, I would say Fast Company, but Fast Company has evolved into something where it's all about freaking out about everything. Like it's very one-toned stuff, but yes. Work Lab. And yeah, if you go and look for work trend index report as well, you'll find your way to that. Once in a while, you'll see, hey, that's a really interesting article. Like, what is this Work Lab thing? It's Microsoft. So of course, lots of data. Everybody wants to be flexible. All these conversations that we've been having the last 3 years, but the majority of employees like to have that level of flexibility. How many are hybrid? Okay, so about half. And then how many there's no policy, really, or you have to be in there every day, 5 days a week? Yeah. So how did you do the pandemic when you're under that model? Were you just?
I only started there in November, but the pandemic, they it all.
Yeah. And then when it was over, they said that we're done?
They did hybrid when it was over, and there were some higher ups that used it, so they took it away from us.
Yeah, those higher ups. That's right.
Yep. It only takes one.
Yeah, I was working for a company where they had a flexible policy that if something happened, or they were flexible, if you had to bring in your child, they didn't have official daycare, but they would kind of give space to workspace for if something happened and you had to bring your child or your dog. That was abused. So apparently all it takes is somebody's out of control dog pooping everywhere in the office to say no more of this. But yeah, so these are the scary slides coming up. So just what are the risks of not managing your data? Of course, we've all seen versions of this. The problem is that data is growing so rapidly. It is incredible. In fact, every time I hear Jeff Teeper, who's now the president of collaborative apps at Microsoft, so the father of SharePoint, kind of all those SharePoint teams, Yammer now called Viva Engage, kind of OneDrive, all of those tools that he owns. He always talks about, says that the last time we did the conference in the last year, more content is created per month than all of the years previous put together. It's exponentially, I guess I'm facing the audience, exponentially growing the volume of content that's out there. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the problem then is that the expense of the risk for that increases. And part of that is, this is not a talk about a ransomware or cybersecurity, but the idea though is that if you're in a small to mid-sized company, the cost for a security breach of problems with your data is so much greater because the big guys there have redundancy, they have systems and balances in place to cover those. It's usually like a system that's impacted, not your entire system. I've had 2 clients that were hacked and then were sent the letters, the ransom letters. One who paid because he had no other choice, and the other who just said, forget it, I'm gonna take the loss on that, and backed up, lost like several days of data. Very expensive for that to happen. Like I got hacked where I did one of those where I was trying to install something and it was running into problems. So I disabled MFA to do that and forgot to turn it back on. And for like a week, somebody went in and hijacked. Now it was my personal demo tenant. So they sent me the threat. I said, no, thank you. Reset, fine, but it's I drive a stick and I have a sunroof. So that's the international signal for, I'm aware of the speed laws. I'm aware of this stuff. Thank you, may I move over, or whatever. International symbols is recognized. How can governance help? So there's a lot of great data that's out there. Governance is a term, I kind of poke fun at it. It's like the G word that we say that's out there. my experience with this, so as a young project manager working for the phone company, so instantly thrust into massive projects. My largest was about an 18-month project where I was doing a data center consolidation. So everything was about security. There were new apps on the front end. There was new hardware on the back end. We were moving hardware we were consolidating from 3 to 1 new location. In Fairfield, California, so if everybody knows that region. So spent a lot of time working with EDS in Sacramento and at the data center, which is right by the Jelly Belly factory, if you know where that is in Fairfield. Yeah. So spent a lot of time there for that 18-month project for what ended up being really a move over 1 weekend. And I'll tell you, I did not sleep a lot that weekend. But, so let's get in. So I surveyed a group of MVPs, and I love this, of folks that I reach out to that work in the governance space, information management, SharePoint MVPs, Teams MVPs, a bunch of folks. And those that, like Joy, we know all of the people. And I asked them to define governance, and these are verbatim how they responded. So this was in a tweet jam, so that's why it came through this. So here's what they said. It's a living, breathing thing. It should include everything that needs to be governed. I love the whole helpful, sounds helpful, isn't. It should include training and communication. Have a vision, build a plan, then execute. Oh, okay, thank you. So that people understand what it is, where to go for help. It's a frame of mind. It's an attitude. Yeah. Common set of rules, both to build it and support it. It's probably the closest to. Needs to be adjusted over time. It's not a document that you complete and then shove into a drawer. Make a plan and adjust when things change. So here's the reality. It's like all of these things are true and none of it is helpful. Yeah. What? I did not. I know. I know. As the Copilot comes back and says, the computer says no. It is. What are we actually trying to solve here? So there's what people say. So they say things like, hey, we're spending too much on this. We're spending too much. We've got to, what do we need all these licenses? Do we need the premiums? What are we actually using out there? And then I'm concerned about what data can access. This is the number one problem. It's like, what are people accessing? And then, I'm just one person. I'm trying to do all this. It's still the famous question. I remember sitting in a conference in London, and there were about 300 people in the audience, and it was Virgil Carroll, who's a good friend of some of ours that's out there, longtime speaker. And he said, how many people are in an organization, over 5,000 people, and you had a third of the hands went up that you own SharePoint stuff. A bunch of hands went up. And he said, how many people do you have managing SharePoint? And there's one gentleman that was there. He said, I've got about 50,000 users. He says, there's me and I have a part-time person. That model, it's stayed. So you're there. If you own Teams, if you own these systems, you are always going to be understaffed. One of my favorite things to say to my kids when something is hard is suck it up, buttercup. This is the reality. All right. So what people actually mean here is, how can I reduce my costs? How can I stay on top of this and make sure I'm spending only what I need? How do we decrease our level of risk? So what are the risks that are out there? This is something I'm a big Deming, W. Edwards Deming, if you're familiar with that, which is constantly optimized. You're we're running at 99.9%. Awesome. How can you do better? My kids also loved when they my daughter who was straight A's, and I'd say, but how could you do better? What more could you have done? Only an A? Why not an A+? I was joking with her, but there's something got ingrained into her around that. And thankfully, she's a very, very smart woman, and she's that. If you know her story, some of you follow, she is an incredible superhero. But how can we make management of M365 more scalable? Got everything. Yeah, we're talking about Teams here, but all of this stuff is relevant. So again, these are what people actually mean when they're asking. It's all perfectly clear, right? You now know what to do. You're prepared to go out there, keep managing the stuff, right? So I'll come back to the things, these three areas. But so I look at this, I talk a lot about practical governance. And it's the thing that annoys me, and it has to do with my brain chemicals and all of the way that I work. But I'm the one that sends the abrupt emails and people say, "Are you angry?" I said, "No, I answered your question. It's the factual response there. I'm sorry." So I'm better. I put emoticons in now, so you know, hey, it's all good. Right, exactly. So first one is around understanding the cost drivers. And so when you start getting down to the detail of these things, so you have licensing, storage, and the consumption model of whatever the services are. So this stuff does broadly serve all of M365. But things like the problems that are out there, people that should not have licenses. They were offboarded. They've left the company, or they were given licenses as a partner. Whatever it is, you're still paying for their licenses. You never turn them off. That is a pretty consistent problem, especially if you're in a larger organization where you have, for example, SharePoint admins, Teams admins, Exchange admins. You've got all these different services. You turned it off at yours. The word never got out that this is no longer an employee. You're still paying for other licenses that are out there. So inactive users remain licensed. This is another thing, especially when you're paying premium licenses or extenders. If you're like Power Platform and you're paying for the premium connectors or whatever it is that it's out there and people aren't actually using it. One of my favorite conversations to have when I would have an overly demanding person coming and saying, "We need this feature in SharePoint, you need to be doing this and this other thing," is I would go look at the usage reports. Like, that thing you said is so urgent, you've not accessed that team or that site in 6 months. Data is fun. Licensed external users that I mentioned. Yeah, so there's a lot. Users that are over licensed. Like, we would find people that had E3 and E5 licenses. Okay, if you want to do that. Too many licenses that are out there. Around storage. You have site storage limits that are being increased that are out there, but how are you managing that? OneDrive storage capacity threshold that's increasing, they're surpassing that. You get all of those super annoying messages like, "Hey, I'm exceeding my space," and whatever product that's there. Large SharePoint sites and OneDrives, they're not cleaned up, they're not archived. You have all of these unused SharePoint sites that are out there. I know it never happens to any of you, but I dealt with a lot of reorgs and restructure of that, where that was why so many SharePoint sites were abandoned, how many teams were abandoned. So there's no effort to consolidate, because the people that went and built it, they went and built the new thing, moved the things that they needed, and then never notified anybody. And so you have this content where you're just trying to divine what's going on with it. Do we need this? And so those are types of things that you can go in and automate and clean up and prepare for. You've got premium connectors in Flows Power Apps. Yeah, see, I still call it Flows there, but yes, because it would have taken up too much space on this line. I changed it to Flow because we all know that's Power Automate, people. Come on. So that and Power Apps, and then there's just that clutter around that. So, quick show of hands. For organizations, is anybody running like a version of like a Power Platform COE, a Center of Excellence, to review regularly? So that just part of your system, is it working?
Yeah, I actually recently did it because nobody in the company had heard about it or even knew about it. I was like, getting me the license.
That's excellent. If you're not yet, if you don't have that for, a broader strategy around a center of excellence, a governance body looking at all of your systems, Power Platform is going to get very expensive very quickly if you are not managing, understanding who's building what, are they being used or not. Like, we went in and ran for a customer, we were using a third-party tool. I'm not going to name any names here, Orchestrate. But doing like the assessment that, so Joy with Orchestrate up here, so we're fans and partners of that. But to go and do like a self-assessment and understand, like, yeah, this person is creating a lot that then no one's using. Are they learning? Like, it's a great place to have a conversation with the individual. Are they learning about it, or are they being productive and building things that nobody's then using. How productive is that? What are you paying for there? So just being aware of what people are doing. Then you have the risk side of it, which is where a lot of the governance then focuses on. And so here, I mean, this is a broad category of things. You need to review, assess, adjust, refine constantly. It's an ongoing thing. So having that governance body that's looking at all of these different factors, that's how you reduce risk. The number one risk, and I learned this lesson, thankfully, my first real job that wasn't like working for relatives or cutting weeds in the California summers on the hills, with a weed eater. Or me, I was the manual. I had the big scythe thing, the rake-looking, swing it, and blisters on the hands after 5 minutes. But the first job was working as a runner for a law firm when I was 19. So salaried position, I would go and file paperwork at the state and muni courts all around, the Supreme or Superior and muni courts all around Northern California. And I was in the car most of the time, but driving around. But I learned the lesson that from the lead partner that would talk about the life cycle of the files and how part of my job, my responsibility was to go to the cold storage, which we had across the street. We also had over Beacon Storage. We had bankers boxes, like hundreds of them or thousands of them. And when the time came, my job was to go and get the boxes and within 7 days of the end of life was to go to a professional facility to have them destroyed. Because if they remained, then they would be liable, because for discovery, they couldn't lie and say, we don't have them. They were destroyed because they exceeded its lifespan, 7 and 10 years, whatever it was. And so it's a very real thing. And so I learned that lesson about the life cycle management of content, and most of us don't have a life cycle on our content. And so that is the number one area of risk. Well, I'd say number two after permissions. Who has access to life cycle of content? So how do we scale this thing? Well, one, there's other questions that are out there. Do we go and build something? Can you build something? All these, I've heard that all these things, having worked for a number of ISVs and partner with ISVs, you can go build it. The APIs that were available for the third-party tool providers to build it are for the most part there. You could go do that. Is that what you want to do for a living? Is then maintain all of those tools that you're building to automate all that stuff? Or do you go buy a third-party tool that does all of that out of the box, plus a bunch of other special sauce that you likely can't do? So there's that. There's many ways to automate around all of this. My favorites are on the top there. So for different reasons, because honestly, all four of them have strengths in different areas. And you look at, and having worked for ISVs, and Joy can even confirm this, I mean, sometimes you just know that, look, what you're trying to do, your requirements are a little bit different. We probably aren't the best match for this. I worked for a company, does anybody remember the company Exceller? Yes. If you have worked in the SharePoint space for a long time, then you got all the harassing phone calls and stuff. I was the chief evangelist for Exceller. I was damage control when a stupid salesperson pissed off a customer or said something wrong or whatever. But we had an awesome product called Control Point. And so a lot of the conversations, so the salespeople would get so mad when I would talk with the customer, I'd say, we're not the best fit for that. You should go and talk to Metalogix or AvePoint or go talk with ShareGate. That's more what you need to go and do. And have those conversations. And they were so appreciative, and the salespeople were furious. You just lost me that sale. I said, no, what I saved us was, we would have sold them, it would have been oversell, we wouldn't have been able to make it, they would have been unhappy with it, we would have refunded it, so we lost the time, all the money, and we'd never get that customer back. And then we launched a new product. That person that I referred to came back and bought the other product because they trusted the company. That was a hard lesson a lot of salespeople didn't learn. But just want to talk again back to the topic of governance. Like when I started speaking officially in Microsoft events, so I joined Microsoft in 2006. So 19 years ago, I spoke in an internal event called Tech Ready. I think they've rebranded that. But there used to be Tech Ed publicly, and then Tech Ready. And Tech Ed was replaced with Build and Ignite. Used to be Inspire for the partners. It's gone now. If you didn't know that, it's permanently gone. So Ignite for IT pros, Build for engineering, and that side of it. Anyway, my first session was in 2006 internally was governance, and my peer, Mike Watson, and I, we had maybe 5 people in the room talking about governance. A year later, 2007, at Tech Ready, we had a full room, and it was my friend Bill Baer, who is a peer of mine. If you know Bill through the longtime SharePoint guy at Microsoft, and talking about governance and backup and kind of all the foundational things on the back end there. Full room, eager ears wanted to hear about that. And it's what's great too is that similarly, this space has really exploded. Sorry, I'm going to mention it again. Copilot has really surfaced interest in governance because what do you need to do to get your data ready for Copilot? The same stuff we've been telling you for the last 25, 30 years. Yeah, is it on there? Is there?
No, just all that.
Oh yeah, all this stuff.
All that.
All this stuff. Right. So much around that. Yeah, little things like my first sessions as a non-Microsoft employee was around the importance of metadata and information architecture. And so same stuff that I've been talking about all the time. Then we introduced this Teams thing, and I don't need to go into much detail around like what happened here. The biggest complaint, number one, people are like, I think it's still the fastest growing Microsoft product in Microsoft history. Now with that, it does kind of all the things that we know about Teams. I don't need to tell you about that. There's this thing that's out there. So sprawl can be dangerous, in part because organizations don't fully understand the business impacts of what they're doing, or more importantly, not doing inside their system. So sprawl can be dangerous. It can lead to, poor productivity. It means that your intellectual property is spread across all these different data silos when it's not optimized, tagged, classified, organized. Then it's not going to be used efficiently. You're not going to find it when you need it. We've all run into the problem, and unfortunately, it's not really solved right now with the new chat versus channels experience and stuff, that it's still really confusing to find stuff. So more and more, I have to go use the search bar to find something that I was working in earlier that same day, because it's already become buried in stuff. Because of that, it opens you up to security risk. What's the life cycle of that? Is this a duplicate piece of data? Are we working on the same thing? Where are we collaborating with each other around? Kind of all those things. It can then decrease business value because when data can't be found in a timely manner, when it's not accurate, when it's not updated, when it's not classified properly, it's not accessed and used the right way, you're degrading your own content, its usefulness. So, sprawl, bad thing. Do we all agree sprawl is bad? Actually, I look at it from the positive side of things. It also means people are using it. I'm more worried when there's no activity than when there's a lot of activity. I got an argument at a SharePoint. So after a SharePoint, I was speaking in the user group in Helsinki, and we were at this bar around the corner, and I was arguing that somebody argued the point that we were talking about creating content, blogging, and things that are out there for the community. He said, well, there was this great article on that. I'm not going to go write about the same thing. I said, why? He says, well, that's like the definitive article. Like, they answered the question. I said, yeah, but that's not with your experience, with your perspective. Like, don't stop yourself from creating that content. So it's good to have more content. What we need are better filters, better tools to then organize, classify, find that content. So you have to do this. Sprawl is a sign of adoption engagement with sloppy governance. So if you have sprawl, it's because your governance is broken. All right, so what are the 10 essentials for effective team governance? Because by now, you're probably thinking, okay, Christian has freaked me out a little bit about data breaches and sprawl and all that. I just want to get right into what are the 10 essentials for effective teams governance. That's why I came here. That's why I paid all this money, was specifically for this session. First, let me tell you a story about a project team that I was on a few years back. No, I'm kidding. It's all right. What I do want to point out some differences with my background is that, again, I was a business analyst turned technical project manager, and then went in, was a PM. I joined Microsoft to help launch what is now, it was Microsoft Managed Services, MMS, became BPOS, which then became Office 365. BPOS, by the way, is Business Productivity Online Services. Stupid name, stupid acronym. Became Office 365. And then I left and went and became chief evangelist and a chief marketing officer. Like, I've been in tech for almost 34 years. But I'm a marketing guy I haven't worked a lot in pure marketing roles. And so a lot of this stuff, as this fits in, it's that practical side of it. I've actually gone and done this, run these groups, run these bodies. So hopefully some of this makes sense here. So the way that I organize it is that just try to classify it in 3 areas that are essential. When I talk to customers, when I talk to partners, there's really 3 categories of where people need to focus. So there's prevention. These are activities that can take place before you deploy. This is things like provisioning a site in a way that ensures, like, the whole issue of tagging content, assigning metadata. The more that you can automate those things so that you're not relying on a user to do that. Because what happens when you make metadata optional? What do people opt to do? Not apply any metadata, right? Just move on through, right? Just upload. Hey, I'll just email you a copy. Prevention, getting this set up so that you can make it as frictionless, I like that word here, for the end user but then preventing, having the guardrails up, the bumper rails in the bowling lane. 2 is your administration. So it's the guardrails, the framework around which you collaborate safely, kind of the rules and how you manage those. And then there is the active or proactive part of that, which is the community management. So this is the ongoing feeding and nurturing, identifying shifting user behaviors. Because the funny thing that happens when users understand how they're being measured, what do? They change their behavior to optimize to the metric. And then that breaks other metrics. So you have to constantly review and look at what are the usage patterns. The policies we put in place, are they still making sense? What are the exceptions that we're seeing? So this is the Deming philosophy. If you want to go to sleep quickly, read a book written by Deming or about Deming. Love the guy, but not exciting. The highest quality award you can earn for a business in Japan is the Deming Award. So if you don't know who he is, he was sent to Japan after World War II to help rebuild the country, and he's beloved in Japan. I've been there, I've helped 2 companies open offices in Japan, and they talked about the Deming Quality Award. Anyway, so with all of that, he talked about constantly refine, optimize, look at. We're at 99.9, how do we get to 3 nines, 5 nines, whatever that is? So if you don't feed and nurture your prevention and administration activities, but more than others, it's about ensuring that your end users are successful ultimately. So let's get into the 10 areas, the detail around each one of these. So prevention, the first 2 things that I believe are essential to governing Microsoft Teams. So first up is the creation of a formal governance body. You need to have, this is the COE model, but expanded for all of your systems. So what's included in that? So that's where you're actually going through, I'm intentionally, by the way, keeping this high level, and I know that I've got 24 minutes here left. And again, if there are questions, raise a hand, we'll interrupt me here. But you'll have the slides, you'll have the detail, and if you want to go and search the word governance on my blog, you will find a lot of content talking about this stuff. So I've been in organizations where it's very formal. I've run that, where the governance bodies, where we had very strict rules around the structure of that. But what happens is when people understand that there's a process and you're consistent with that, they start following the process or saying, hey, this is not fitting because of these reasons. Like, I was running a governance body where we had a published agenda. If your topic was not on the agenda, sorry, you need to there was a process for getting that in there because we were going through. And we also said all stakeholder organizations are responsible for sending a person who had the ability to make a decision. So we had people where we said, okay, your team, hey, David's missing. where is he? We can't move forward on this, and send somebody that says, oh yeah, no, I'm here representing. It's like, all right, so you're saying yes, like, well, I probably need to take to Davis. All right, we're done. We can't finish this. You're delaying it 2 weeks to the next meeting. Like, whoa, no, he sent me for this. Like, nope, you can't make the decision. We can't move it forward. David knows the process. He signed this. He signed up for this. So we're very organized, very structured that way. But this is something that, again, where people know that, because having run project management organizations, and I would get my PMs that would be out, my analysts and engineers would be out working with internal clients, and they would then say, hey, I've got this other side project. I'm like, nope, you are not authorized to accept any projects that have not been run through the process so that we know the impact to everything else. We had limited headcount to be able to do these projects. We're prioritized on what we do. It's on a board, it's on the dashboard, everybody sees it. We're not gonna subvert the process. And I would call out the directors or VPs that would try to go around the process to the VP or the president of the division. So, yes.
You nailed a big topic is decisions, choices, and the impact of those choices.
Yes.
And getting the right people in the room. I've done the same thing you have with governance boards. And getting the right people that have the authority to make those decisions is almost impossible because they've got way bigger things to do.
Yeah. So, right. Well, that's the thing. Until it impacts them and they can't, right. So that's why I say, look, you send a representative that has the ability around these things. Because in this example, because we publish the agenda, we'd have some of these stakeholders that would say, I agree with the recommended on the path forward for this. I do not have any changes to this. Like, I don't need to be there to make a decision. I will put myself below the decisions that need to be made by these other organizations. We'd actually have people that would come in to this, once we got it going and people trusted the process, would actually come in. They knew they were third on the agenda. So midway through the meeting, a bunch of other people would come into the room to make sure they understood. They weren't the decision makers, but they were impacted by that portion of the discussion. Would come in, stand there, ask a couple of questions, discuss it, agree to it right there, and then go. And so there's ways that you can do that. But what made this work is our VP 100% bought into the model and said to her direct reports, you will do this. And so you can't do it without that top level support. That's a whole nother discussion there. All right, prevention. So promoting that center of excellence, again, we hear a lot about COEs these days. I mean, especially with Power Platform, it's so essential to have that. So you're looking at all of the content that's out there. There's a lot of best practices on, Microsoft has their COE. There's a lot of gaps there, but just the concept of a COE, a center of excellence around this, so that you have a process, so that monthly you're reviewing what has everybody built, what are all the new things, what are the usage, the activity, what are the things that are not being used, okay, what do we do with those if they're not being used? Let's reach out, get data around the things that are in there. So again, you can make sure that you're not spending money that you don't need to do, that you don't have solutions that were developed that no one has ever used. Because there's a difference. There's rarely used, that could still be valid. It's just rarely needed, but when it's needed, we need it. And then there's things that it was built and not a single person has ever used it. Like, do we need this? Clear it out. On the administration side, so consolidating your data, and this is a huge one, and there's a lot of vendor solutions that are out there. I mean, this is to go and have backup and things that are out there. I'm not going to get into the religious discussion around the tools in Microsoft. Microsoft went and bought a third-party tool solution provider that was, and I'll be honest, was not a competitor to any of the other players out there. Like, they went and bought like the cheapest solution to have a solution. But if you're looking for granular control and backup and all of that, it's not from a Microsoft solution. It's coming from the third-party community that's out there. There's lots of tools that are out there. Why do we consolidate? We've all seen a version of this. there's the data, there's what we can see, there's what is actually out there, all of that other data. So if you don't have a process, if you're not cleaning that up regularly, like one of the favorite things about automation that I love is a person who creates sites and teams. I invite external users in all the time. The level of automation through some of the third-party tools, I think they all pretty much do this, but I get monthly emails that said, Christian, you're the owner of these 4 teams, these 10 SharePoint sites. Are they still valid? I get that regardless of how busy they are. But there's an automatic policy that if there's a team or a site that's not been accessed for 6 months, it automatically then locks out permissions. If I go back in for a certain amount of time, and then if nobody raises a flag after 3 more months, then it archives the data. That having a policy around that is so essential. So cleaning up, consolidating your data, because I'm sure none of you have ever done a reorged your data and systems, but it's important to go in and constantly look at what were we using there, where does it need to go, clean that up. All right. Administration, number 4 is ultimately about proactively managing the content lifecycle. And this one, it's massive. So this is like what I just described, to know that if I create a team and then it's not you, like we actually have a policy in my last company where if in the first 30 days it was created, but in 30 days, not a single person accessed it, we don't ask, we shut it down. Like if you're creating something new and then there's no data in it, there's no movement on it, like it must have been a mistake, automatically shut it down. We never had any complaints from that. But having that content lifecycle in there by default, and so that you get all the alerts like, hey, this file, this data is about to be deleted. All right, hey, I'm going to go take action on it. But you've got those policies in place so you can move it to a place that you need longer term. So how you formalize that, it can be difficult to aggregate a lot of those things. You have to ask, who are the people using them? What are they doing? What is the data that's being used? Really understanding the sensitivity of the data, is it being classified, used the right way? Again, all things that you can do as part of the provisioning process, set it up so it's intentional. Like, I like provisioning because you can automate, again, guardrails for a lot of these things. Like if I'm in the marketing organization and I say, well, I need a new team, we've got a new initiative, I go in, I have access to 3 templates. And each of them are authorized for the marketing department and for a project, for an initiative, and kind of a special thing that's out there. I could always request a custom, and here's what I need, and then I can negotiate with IT and get that provision. But without, again, frictionless as possible, I don't have to go ask, can I create a team and wait to be approved? I've got that, but the IT automates, they know that if I create it and then I don't use it in 30 days, it's gone. If I create it and start using it, but it's slow, it's inactive, I'm getting the monthly prompts. If I get a certain level of usage and activity, maybe I don't get prompt until 30 days of inactivity or something. So there's a lot that you can do for that. Of course, there's lots of data out there. I'm going to go through that. I've got 15 minutes left. So establishing that provisioning process is so critical. I just described a lot of that. See, I'm even talking faster through these areas. Who has, show of hands, how many of you have automated your provisioning process for new teams and sites? I know you have. So you do. Okay, there you go. So neither of you count. No, yeah. So we do too. So, but it's so to go and do this, again, do you have to buy a third-party tool to do it? No, Microsoft gives you the tools to go and do it. It's a lot of effort to go and do that and then manage that. So you've got to balance those, the cost versus the need. But the strength of provisioning your system is that you can have all the guardrails up in place, have the content lifecycle, have all the policies, all of those controls in place, and then not worry about it, expecting your user to do the right thing. Because most mistakes are not intentional. It's because, like, hey, I didn't know, I'm just trying to get my work done. So you've got to make that, as frictionless as possible. Then, of course, you've got the external collaboration. I mean, this is a huge problem. I know a lot of companies, and I worked for a company a couple of years back that had a no external sharing policy. Like, I ran partnerships and alliances. I didn't work internally. I worked with outside folks. So what did I have to do? At this highly secure product company, I was sending emails with the huge attachments or using my personal OneDrive. How stupid is that? Because they made it so locked down to be safe, they were forcing people to become part of the shadow IT movement. We're all there. Come on, we're all in shadow IT somewhere in there. So who has access to sharing, to know who that is, to be able to clean that up, automate that process. Again, it's such an important part of making sure your system is secure and of governance. Are you aware? And most organizations aren't even aware of how many external people that are there. I mean, one of the biggest risks is that we invite a person in that's a partner out there, gave them access to whatever we gave them access to for a valid reason, and no one ever went back in to shut it off. That's the most common thing. So most breaches happen because of this lack of governance and cleanup. All right, then we have the automate repeatable processes. I'm not going to spend any time on that. We all know fundamentally what that is. You look for the opportunities of where are you seeing trends, and this is where you have governance in place, ongoing. You're always going to do this. You're going to be looking at what are the trends, how are people changing. We've got these rules. People are going around the rule. I always say that people are like water running down a hill. You put a rock in front of them, what happens? They run around the rock. So they'll find a way to get their work done. And so that's why where Deming's philosophy comes in place. You're constantly optimizing, you're constantly reviewing, assessing, and adjusting based on those user needs. Then you have this side of it, and there's a lot of disagreement out there apparently around this where people just want everything to be automated on the back end. This is where you have to, it's hard. Talk to people around the community management side of it. So focusing on adoption and engagement. Microsoft went through this. So just so you know how Microsoft, how they have all these resources, you got the adoption website. Like the adoption site was launched by Caruana Gatimu when she joined. Why did she do that? Because she was one of us out in the community and saying, Microsoft, what are you doing? Like you need to focus on end users actually using stuff. So I was a frustration when I joined because being an independent consultant and joining Microsoft and was thinking about what end users are actually trying to do and all this data and stuff. And they were concentrating on, hey, well, we sold these licenses. Microsoft is all about, we sold this enterprise agreement, this EA, and so we're good for 3 to 5 years, whatever the agreement was. Whether they use it or not, we didn't care. What was happening is that they were selling these EAs. At the end of the EAs, traditionally 3 years, nobody was renewing. Or we bought 10,000 licenses and we only bought 500. They're like, what? This drop? What's going on? Well, no one's using it. And so Microsoft said, maybe engagement, maybe usage is actually important. And so they shifted the ship, they moved it, they course corrected so that engagement and adoption are metrics for partners. So it's not just did we sell more licenses as a partner for Microsoft, but are the people then using the solutions? And there have to be percentage of usage to be able to get that. Microsoft salespeople have to have people using the things they're selling. So this goes back to my experience with the frustrated salespeople that just want to sell stuff. And I'm like, doesn't really fit what they need. Let's sell them what they're actually going to use. They'll be happier. They'll become advocates for us. Anyway, focus on adoption engagement. Have a communication plan out there. That's part of it too, so that people governance should not be in a black box. You should be as transparent as possible. Publish everything, have the notes out there, have feedback loops so that people can say, hey, this didn't meet our needs, or we've got this new thing that you didn't address. Have all that out there, send out email blasts. And then this is something that's my philosophy is create a culture of change management. So you're good at adjusting on the fly because the tech is changing quickly. Copilot. That's the squirrel in the room, sorry. But it's changed so quickly, you need to be able to adjust and move very quickly as well. So it's really all three of these things are ongoing efforts. They should be discussed regularly as part of your governance activities, documented within your center of excellence. So it should be part of the rhythm of the business that you're looking at. What are our usage metrics? How are people using this? How is this shifting? Why is one organization so heavy in Teams and the other one, they barely touch Teams, they're still doing things in email? It's not that it's wrong. You can't force different styles, different teams, especially if you're geographically dispersed, very different collaboration styles depending where you are. The importance is, are they getting their work done? If they're not getting the work done, if they're not centralizing their content, there are some centralized rules, like the content has to be in SharePoint for these reasons that we do all the other things that we do on the back end. But you're having these conversations and people saying, I'm not clear on this, things are changing too fast. All right, we're gonna move from monthly communications to weekly communications around this. Tell you more detail of what we're doing. Some other resources, Microsoft has some. Here, there's links that you can see in the slides later. Microsoft, of course, can help. I'm gonna zip past a bunch of these things with the 8 minutes I've got left. There's these different areas and what they are. If you're not familiar, go take a look at those. There's also, if you're not familiar with the Microsoft 365 maturity model, if you're wondering, like, where are we? How do we compare to other companies? This is a great place to go and look at. And it follows the old CMM model. If you're not familiar with the maturity model, it follows that where you go in. Being at a 100 or 200 level is not necessarily bad. You might be right where you need to be for your size, for your industry, for what you're trying to accomplish. But it shows you where other companies are and what it means to move up into those other areas. There's no like tests or certifications around these things, but it's just a great way to better understand, are we doing best practices? Are we leveraging our technology that we're paying for the most? That's one of the frustrating things about this, the whole business or digital transformation, that phrase. And most people interpret that as meaning, well, I've upgraded the latest version. That's not what that means. You could be on old technology, but milking every drop out of that technology. And are you optimized to the technology that you have? Are you leveraging the latest tools? Maybe you're not ready, but you're optimized for what you have. That's what that digital transformation really is. Where should you actually begin? I always tell people, conduct an assessment. Create a baseline. Know where you are today. A lot of people that say, it's like, do you have this outlined in your organization? People are like, oh yeah, we do. I think I do. It's like, you don't. If you don't know, you do not have it documented. What is involved? There's kind of the generic high-level things that aren't helpful. Again, what does it mean to go in to find what are you actually trying to achieve? What's the goal? What's the purpose of each of those things? Of course, do as part of that, your discovery, gather documentation, your policies, procedures, records. What are the rules that you need to be compliant to in your industry, in your size company? All these best practices that are out there and available. Know what you should be doing, whether or not you're doing it. Then benchmark against those, compare, here's what we're actually doing versus what we should be doing. I've actually run audits for companies. I went in and audited financial systems and collaboration systems for a almost $1 billion company. And we did a bunch of policies. I did trainings for weeks and weeks and weeks. And once they implemented, the CFO was very serious about this. And I then did spot checks a couple weeks later, random. Nobody knew I came in and did it, and found people that had gone back to their old styles. And I felt bad, but 2 people got fired off of that first one. You better believe we did not find any mistakes on the next spot check. But again, benchmark, know what you're doing wrong there. Interviews and surveys, talk to people about it. Don't build a plan in a vacuum. Review all the system configurations, what needs to be there. Of course, look through all the data. Areas that you can improve, look at areas where people are spending a lot of time getting the data that they need, where are there opportunities for automation. And then develop your plan based on that. I know this is still super, super high level around what you need to go and do. And this is what I go and I preach about. And I'll say that each of these slides, I have long versions of blog posts around each one of these. I've got, with Smarter Consulting, we've got a white paper that's coming out in a few weeks. That's more detail of this. We're also happy. I can talk to you about it if you've got questions, but you'll get the slides. But this is my framework. This is what I do with clients. So 1, go through, do the purpose and scope. This is a 9-step framework for governance. So the purpose, the scope, the roles and responsibilities, who's involved, who has ownership, making sure that you recognize here's the executive sponsor, here's the responsible stakeholders. Push that out there because you'll think, hey, we're done. And somebody will be like, wait a second, you didn't think of this team. Like, oh, yeah, you'll always get more information there. Develop your policies and standards. Then you have the ones that are working, that are in place. Then you say, well, yeah, but we're non-compliant in these areas, so we need to be doing these other things. So you start developing those things. You're looking at best practices. You're looking at the maturity model of where other organizations are, like all those different things. There's so much help, so much guidance out in the community around these things. No matter what industry, what size organization you are, like reach out to the community for help around these standards, around that. Like, so what are our data protection rules? What are our security standards, the sign-ins? How do we collaborate externally? Please make external collaboration a top priority. How your sharing guidelines, your retention and archiving, all of those things, know what they are. Whether or not you have a tool, you have automation, know what they should be before you build your action plan. Have your change management strategy. Like, how are we going to do this? How often are we going to review this? What sign-offs do we need to have for this? I love having the COE model, so you can say, here's what we think the impact will be to this change. Let people and the different stakeholders groups voice their opinion there. Always have those user feedback mechanisms. And remember, like, you're sitting in a conference room with 30 people on a monthly basis reviewing this stuff. Some people who have excellent questions that should be discussed will be too nervous to raise their hand. So you need to, like, I would do this where I ran that group. I would then go and have with each stakeholder body monthly meetings with them in a smaller group, and then I would have one-on-ones when I felt like, hey, I've not heard from this group in a while. I know there's a lot of stuff that's going on. I would go have one-on-ones, and all three of them would draw out different information, which could have all been said in that one meeting, but you got to fish that out. And I'm still a fan of having anonymous feedback as well. So people that can ask like what they think is a stupid question and be like, somebody asked that question. Like, I'm so glad they did because nobody said it and we completely missed it. The communication plan, so as you are starting to go and say, hey, this is it, then we're going to send out this weekly email with all the changes. This is where the dashboard is. This is where you go to get this information. Here's when we have our meetings. Is there anything that we're missing? So you have that as part of the plan. You adhere to that schedule. Then you have your monitoring and reporting, so you start refining that. And it's funny, Sharon Weaver and I do a weekly project management podcast or webcast every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. It happened this week while we were here. It was pre-recorded. But we talked about the fact of when you have all of your different stakeholders asking for reporting that's all different. And what do you do? And you try to unify that and create, because then you spend all your time, if you're a PM, you know this, all your time doing reporting and none of your time actually managing and optimizing the project, whatever it is. So establish those mechanisms, have all those things in place, have the audit and compliance checks for all those things to make sure that trust but verify your own data there. Then have that regular review and continuous improvement where you're going back, not looking at just the data of the systems you're monitoring, but a regular review of your process, of the COE. Are these the right things? And then risk management and contingency planning, again, as you're identifying risks, you have a plan around each one of those risks. And then the engagement and culture building should be part of that discussion. That's the end of your discussions and your COE meetings on that topic, but make sure it's always part of that plan. There's no possible way I can do all this by myself. Well, you don't have to do it by yourself. Here's the plug for us. It's like we actually help over with Smart Consulting. If you'd like to do that, we do a free consultation. So if you'd like to just talk about it and we could point you in the right direction, if you've got a team to go and do stuff, then grab this or come talk to Jonathan, Sharon, Gavin, or myself over at the Smarter booth today, and happy to talk to you about what's unique about your organization, why you're special and need something that's different than anything else, everybody else. We're all unique snowflakes. And then if you want to reach out to me, drop me a line. I'm at Collab Talk is my independent stuff. So with that, I know we're over, so thank you so much for coming in. And I do want to do this. I forgot to do this in my last one. Everybody smile. I'm going to do a selfie with everybody in the background. So my wife knows that I'm actually working.
Sorry to
So they do that. All right. Thank you so much for coming.